I've mentioned that I haven't been playing as much Go lately. I used to play a quick game every night before I went to sleep. And instead of doing that, when I would normally boot up Fox and play my game before I go to sleep, I've just actually been going to bed at that time. And I've been enjoying the sleep, the extra sleep that I've been getting. So, still wanting to play some kind of Go, I decided I would, boot up my correspondence games again because I do enjoy them and I have been enjoying them quite a bit ever since I've started playing them again. I'm the type to just keep all my correspondence notifications all cleared. I'm constantly checking to see if my opponents have made any moves, and even if I'm playing like dozens of games, I'm always just trying to play the next move. But I've been feeling all right about how they've been going. So I'm thinking like, maybe I haven't really gotten super rusty from not playing. But maybe I thought that a little bit too soon because I jumped on Fox the other day and played with a 5-minute main time live control setting, and I got demolished twice. I got demolished so bad, like, I'm not someone who usually resigns in the opening. First game, I resigned in the opening. Second game, I lost in the mid game and continued to play the lost game. I think we've all been there before. I don't know, but I've definitely been there multiple times where I know the game is pretty much lost, but I just can't help but keep playing on. I got demolished, and I could feel that these were games not games that I lost because my opponents were so strong or anything like that, but more like I lost to myself. I definitely felt some rust, and I've noticed this with other games where if you have a mechanical aspect to the game, like Counter-Strike or Rocket League, for example, things where you have to move, use your kind of quick thinking and instincts and reflexes to judge things really quickly and use muscle memory, things like that. When those things are at play, I find those things are the ones that really go when you haven't been at the hobby for a while. Whereas your strategic thinking, your high level thinking stuff, that usually gets retained. So when I'm playing these Fox games, I realized that my brain wasn't thinking as fast, although I kind of feel like I have better judgment now, but it was, those were tough games. I'm going to have to get back into the faster games. It's definitely a different skill and different muscle to use, and if you don't use it, then it kind of deteriorates. Anyway, welcome to Start Point, the show about Go for Go fans away from the board. And recently I finished reading a book called Opening Theory Made Easy by Otake Hideo, and I have mentioned this book previously. There was an episode a while back on books where I did a huge rundown of all these books and my brief thoughts on each of them based on what I remembered about each book. Some of the books that I mentioned I didn't even read yet. Otake Hideo's Opening Theory Made Easy was one of them, and it was actually the one that was mentioned, I think, quite a bit by commenters who thought this was a good book because it was so helpful to them. And I recently finished it from cover to cover, and I wanted to give you some of my thoughts on it while the memory is still fresh. But before I do that, I want to kind of do a little bit of an overview of Otake Hideo's life. Just a note on his name. You may find sometimes when you Google, especially Japanese names or Korean names or even Chinese names, that the order of the surname and the given name are switched. I will be calling him Otake Hideo, which is closer to the Japanese order, where the surname is placed first. So when you see someone's name like Lee Chang-ho, that's surname first Lee, and then Chang-ho afterwards is the given name. It's actually in Korean, it's pronounced Lee Chang-ho or Lee Se-do, right? But in the Americanized pronunciation, it's Lee. Just a note if you're confused as to why sometimes those names are switched. But I will be calling him Otake Hideo. So Otake Hideo is a Japanese nine dan, and he was part of the legendary Kitani Minoru school, and he joined when he was 9 years old. So a lot of these very, very, very good Go players start off pretty young, and he was part of the first generation of successful Kitani Minoru school graduates, others including Ishida Yoshio and Keito Masao. He turned professional when he was 14 years old in 1956, and he was known to have not much patience while playing the game, as he would sometimes be seen reading comic books while he waited for his opponent to play. Pretty funny thing to do. I would honestly, if someone did that, if a kid did that in front of me while I was playing Go, I would feel like crying or something, because I would just feel like I was not being taken seriously. Although, I mean, kids will be kids. Kids will do whatever they feel like doing without really thinking about just normal etiquette. So he probably didn't mean any disrespect by doing that, but I thought it was funny. He became 9 dan in 1970, and he was one of the strongest players from the late 60s through the mid 90s, winning over 40 titles. He was a contemporary, I believe, of Chochikun, so like the strong 80s Go scene. And then he retired not too long ago. He's at the age of 79 in 2021. So by my count, I don't know when his birthday is, but I guess he's around, a little over 80 now. So legendary Go player, very, very strong, and had was maybe not the like number one for an extended period of time or anything, at least not according to the Go rating history. But he did, again, win over 40 titles, and that's not easy to do. And his career win-loss record was 1,319 wins, 846 losses, 5 draws, and one no result. So that's a 60% win rate, and in the life of a pro, that is pretty impressive. A little note on Otake Hideo's style. He was called cutthroat, described by Toshiro Kageyama, or I guess Kageyama Toshiro, if I'm following the same convention of surname and given name, who you might recognize from Lessons in the Fundamentals of Go. Anyway, he described him as cutthroat who struck fear into the hearts of lesser pros. And that was found in The Secret Chronicles of Handicap Go. I have never heard of that book, so I don't know where you would find that. A lot of these kind of Go books are difficult to find, but apparently that's something that he said. But later on, Otake developed a style I think that most of you may be aware of as being a honte style. Honte is a Japanese term which kind of describes a proper style. When you're studying Go, a lot of the times you'll come across instruction that will say this is the honte move or this is the proper move. And it's really hard to describe it any other way than the proper move. In Go, a lot of things work in every given situation, depending on your goals, but there were certain solid, fundamental, and proper moves that are typical, natural responses to different situations. And so that's the kind of style that Otake developed, and that's what makes him pretty popular as a player for amateurs to study his games, because I've honestly looked at some of his SGF files. Not that they had SGF files back then, but the subsequently created SGF files of his games. And I can agree that they are very clear to understand what is going on, and it's different from studying someone like Lee Se-do, who will do something that is very disruptive and difficult to understand. So when you're choosing a pro to study, that's something definitely to keep in mind. Someone who you can understand is going to be more helpful to you, I think, overall. He's also known as the god of Hayago. Hayago is the Japanese word for quick play Go. This is something that I learned. I don't know if it's related, but it reminds me of like Haya. Maybe that's why it's called Hayago, because it's like every move is like Haya. That word Hayago is used in some tournaments. Like the first tournament which used the word was called the Hayago Meijin, which was in 1954. And okay, this is going to sound a little silly, but it was considered a fast tournament because it gave players only 4 hours of thinking time when most other tournaments allowed about 10 hours. So putting that into perspective, I mean, 4 hours, I haven't even played a game that long. That sounds really long per player, because that's per player. So 8 hours potentially of a game. That's crazy. But apparently that was a fast game, at least back then. Now we have the NHK Cup, which I think is one of the faster tournaments. But I don't recall what the time control for that was. More notes on his style. Otake plays from a come-from-behind style. So I guess what he does is he creates a lot of tension on the board that is kind of hidden. And I feel like I've played games like this where I've read out sequences quite a bit in certain parts of the board, but it just wasn't time to play. So I left that there. And the more you do that, the more you kind of feel out the board in that way and just leave things unsettled, all of a sudden there's going to be an avalanche. And that's the way that Otake Hideo kind of played, where he looks like he's playing a somewhat boring game, and then suddenly there is this avalanche of attack that comes by the setup that he did all game. So it sounds like a really fun style. I think I want to now review more of his games to see if I can find that kind of style appearing. And then a last note on his kind of personality and character. I don't know who wrote this. I found this stuff on the Wikipedia and Sensei's Library articles. I think this one's probably from the Sensei's Library. But someone wrote that Otake had a surprisingly fragile side for a top tournament player, because when he makes a mistake, he becomes disgusted with himself and loses the fight, or loses the will to fight on. That's like one of those mental things that I talked about in an episode way back, where sometimes you lose the game because of a mistake you made, not because the mistake was so huge, but because it just destroys your mental in the middle of the game. But that's Otake Hideo, and I think that is a good introduction to who he was as a Go player. Sure, I could talk a lot more about what he's gone through, but I do also want to mention one other thing, which is that he appears in the documentary The Surrounding Game, and I thought he's a great speaker and ambassador for the game, because I remember his scenes very clearly. And one of the quotes that I really enjoyed of his was this one right here: "The level of the whole Go world, improving the global level of Go, is what's most important. That is the direction everyone, especially professionals, should move towards." And he said it with such genuineness, and you just really have to hear him say it and read the subtitles underneath. But I really liked that from him. And it's just kind of him being this person who plays this proper style and really attracts amateurs to study his games. And then also writing this book called Opening Theory Made Easy. Now, this book is a great contribution to the world of amateur Go. And I'm going to get into the review of that right now. And my thoughts on the book overall, it's really the book you should be getting as a beginner and, advanced beginner. I would say someone who has learned the ladder capture rules, and they know what a ko is. They know what a seki is. They know the basic dead shapes. After you've kind of gotten past that initial fundamental period and you want to start tackling the 19 by 19, this is the book for you. I think this is after reading this book, I think this is the quintessential instructional book on Go. Don't let the title fool you. It says opening theory made easy. And you might think, okay, well, I'm not so interested in the opening. Maybe the opening is just only one part of the game. You want a more comprehensive book. I will say that this book is really not just about the opening, but how to approach the game in general. It's divided into 3 sections, actually. First section is the only one called Fuseki Fundamentals, which is about the opening. The second one is called Good Shape, and the third one is called Strategy. And these sections are the divisions of the book of 20 principles. So they have the principles set up in each of these sections. So there's 7 principles for Fuseki Fundamentals, 6 principles for Good Shape, and 7 principles for Strategy. And these principles, they sound very simple. Sometimes you'll flip through the book and you'll see a principle and you'll be like, oh yeah, I know that principle. I don't need to think about this. But although maybe the first couple pages may be kind of fundamental and basic, I found myself, as I read more on each principle, there were more advanced concepts being brought in, and I felt like I was slowing down and I needed to stay on the last couple pages of each principle a little bit longer to really process what he was saying. And so I think that's another reason why I really think this book is great, because there's a depth to the material. It's not just the fundamental basic stuff and then that's it. And then you throw away the book and you're done with it. It's stuff that I think you can come back to and really reinforce in your learning. So I really enjoyed the book, if you can't tell already, and I wanted to share with you some of my favorite principles that I read throughout the book. Just to give you kind of a hint of certain things, obviously reading the book itself will give you a way better explanation and idea of what I'm talking about. But the first one I want to share with you is principle number 5. The 5-4 point aims at outside influence. Now, I feel like this principle, when I looked at it, it kind of blew my mind, because I thought of the 5-4 as just kind of like this quirky move that you don't really play if you're playing seriously. And it kind of helped me understand what you're trying to do with that first corner move that you play. Because we all know 4-4 and 3-4 are the 2 basic moves that everybody plays. And you gotta, like, if you really, 90% of the moves that we play, they're like 4-4s and 3-4s and whatever combinations you can of them. So it's 2-4-4s or 2-3-4s, 2-3-4s facing away from each other, a 4-4 and a 3-4. There's just all these combinations with those 2 moves themselves. We don't really think too much about the other stuff because, I don't know, it just seems like you rather just focus on the most common stuff. But looking at the 5-4 point, and it may be obvious to some of you that the 5-4 point aims at outside influence. And maybe that was something that I initially thought I knew too. And certainly when I read that principle, I thought, okay, yeah, I think I know that. But as I saw the examples and I saw what he meant by that and what you can do to actually obtain that influence, it really made me open my mind as to like, what can I do and like, how can I think creatively when I am putting that first stone down. And it can, like, I might not even play the 5-4 point, but now that I know what kind of things you can do with the 5-4 point, I feel like it has informed me of my other opening moves as well. And I just really enjoyed it. I just really enjoyed the simplicity of this 5-4 strategy. And I probably will want to use it at some point just to see how it feels. The next principle I want to share that I liked was principle number 11. And this is from the Good Shape section. This one is like a no-brainer. The empty triangle is bad shape. it's almost like you don't need a chapter on this, right? It's just obvious. Everybody knows the empty triangle is a bad shape, but there's depth to this. I thought I knew this principle pretty well. I mean, the empty triangle is bad. Like, yeah, it's no doubt about it. It's just a bad shape, and you should feel bad when you play it. You should feel like that's the last resort. I thought of this empty triangle shape as generally bad, but good in certain situations. And there are situations where you should play an empty triangle. There are situations where you should play an empty triangle, even though it's generally regarded as a bad shape. Typically, I find myself playing it when I need to break through some kind of elephant's eye jump or something. But I thought, okay, well, I know that it's bad in general, and sometimes it's good. So I know the difference between the good and bad version of the empty triangle. But after reading this chapter, I thought to myself, I realized that if I'm playing an empty triangle to break free somewhere, if I'm playing an empty triangle because that's the only move available, then it's not really that I'm playing a good move at this point. I am still playing a bad move. It is the best move to play, but somehow I made a decision earlier in my decisions that makes me play this bad move now. So I should reevaluate what I did before. And that's not something I really thought about when I thought about empty triangles. And because of that, I really liked that principle. Going back to the Fuseki principles, principle number 6 is the next one I want to share with you. The fourth line is the line of development, and the third line is the line of completion. I think this is a way better way to word something that I one of the DDK advice corner bits that I did, where I said the fourth line is delicious, and but the fourth line, I guess they're kind of different points. With the DDK advice corner tip that I gave out, it was more about when someone was trying to give you fourth line territory while they're taking influence. That's usually a better trade for you. What Otake here is saying is that you should look at the fourth line as something that you're going to have potential with and grow in the future, whereas the third line is you're cashing out. I think that this is really one of the things that DDKs should work on, is the different properties of the third and fourth line. These two lines, let's take another step back actually. Where's the first line on the board? The first line on the board is the outside of the board. If you draw a square on the outside border of the board, that's considered the first line, also known as the line of death. The second line is one inner to that first line. So imagine the tengen, the center point of the entire board, is the sky, and the outside edges are the ground. So if you look at it that way, then level 1 is on the very outside. Level 2 is one more line towards the center. The second line being called the line of defeat. And then the third line here, and the fourth line. So the third line and the fourth line, these two lines after those lines, these are key lines. Typically, second line moves too slow. First line moves death. Fifth line moves usually too airy, a little too unsettled. Doesn't really have much to grab onto. Third and fourth line, if you look at pro games, just if you're not familiar with this concept, just look at a pro game and note how many stones are placed in the opening on the third and fourth lines. You'll see a pattern. I mean, unless, obviously when they're interacting with each other with contact plays, Hane, Atari, things like that, that's not really going to apply there because there's other reasons. But let's say you're taking extensions, you're taking bases, and you're taking big points, and you're doing approaches, you'll notice third and fourth line are the key lines. And the subtle difference between those two lines is very, very important. And that's why I like principle number 6. And to reiterate, the fourth line is the line of development, and the third line is the line of completion. I'm going to share with you one more principle that I enjoyed from this book. Again, this book has 20 total principles overall. And this one is from the last section of the book called Strategy. And it's principle number 16. Try to kill 2 birds with 1 stone. One reason I like this principle is because it's kind of a funny... Killing 2 birds with 1 stone is a common saying, but it really applies to Go because you get to use a stone when you play Go. So I think that's pretty funny. But I think I liked this principle because it really tried to get me to synthesize everything I learned throughout the book, because there were so many things you need to think about. You need to think about how you're attacking a certain stone, how you're extending from your own group, and how to make good shape and all that. There are so many things to think about, and this one principle, try to kill 2 birds with 1 stone, is really just saying, with all that stuff in mind, see if you can find perfect moves that do more than one thing. And I think it kind of made me really look at my openings a lot more and just kind of think about, like, not just doing my first instinct move, but thinking about how to do more with the very, very powerful stone that I have. And again, I love this book. This book is beginner friendly. It's also great for intermediate player and advanced players. It's concise. It's 20 principles in about 160 pages, and it's really easy to follow along. He doesn't focus on any given principle for too long. So you can always come back to principles that you feel like you weren't really 100% there with. And it's just really well organized, concise. It focuses on the fundamentals, the things you really should be watching out for. And if you can master this book, you'll be very well set up for your Go future. Now that I finished that book, I am really trying to resist temptation and stop myself from buying another Go book to read, because I still have Go books that I haven't finished. So I'm going to choose one of those and really try to finish those before I go out and buy new Go books, which is an addiction I'm working on. But it's now time for the DDK Advice Corner. And the tip of the day is to look for loose ladders. If you don't know what a loose ladder is, you should probably look it up. It's kind of like a ladder, except you know how a ladder is an Atari after an Atari after an Atari? Well, a loose ladder is not quite Atari per se. It's got 2 liberties, I think, usually. And it's set up in a way where you can kind of ladder in either direction. And so it's still able to be captured. You should probably go and look for a visual on this. It's not something you can learn from just audio. So if you don't know what a loose ladder is, go learn what it is. And once you've learned, try to look for them in your games. I keep missing these, I think. It's hard to see. I feel like I look for the ladder, and if there's no ladder, loose ladders just look like they wouldn't work, so I wouldn't consider them. But I need to start actively looking for them more often. One way you can do this is to review your games and try to find loose ladders. Oftentimes, these strong players, the pros, or strong teachers will be able to quickly spot them for you if you miss them. So, the DDK Advice Corner tip of the day is look for loose ladders. And now it's time for Go News. The 44th World Amateur Go Championship will be on May 17th to the 22nd. It'll include 61 countries, including USA, Canada, Mexico, the Dominican Republic. And it'll be held in Tokyo, where the Neon Keen will be celebrating its centennial, so 100 years old for the Neon Keen. And this tournament, it's an amateur tournament, but it really feels international. It's got 61 countries, as I've said, started in 1979, and just looking at the number of countries involved, it just makes it feel very global and international, unlike a lot of the world major tournaments, which just include the 3 kingdoms of Go: China, Japan, Korea. Although I do have to mention that I did look at the history of this World Amateur Go Championship and the winners of said championship, and every single first place, I believe, was either someone from China, Japan, or Korea. So that made me think, I think we need another level, kind of excluding these three kingdoms. Maybe like a transatlantic tournament. I think I really enjoyed the transatlantic team tournament that they held, but some kind of, regional tournament where China, Japan, Korea are not really involved. Kind of like in Major League, or like in baseball, they have the AAA league or the AHL in hockey, where they have a secondary league that allows other players to develop. And I think for the Western world, we need something like that for people to really be excited about American Go or European Go, to really set a world stage for that. And, this is just an amateur Go championship. So a pro level where it's involving all these countries, I think that would be really exciting. The KCJ Parago tournament, Korea, China, Japan Parago tournament. So they have tournaments where Korea, China, and Japan are, it's exclusively those three. So why not tournaments where they're kicked out of it? Anyway, the KCJ Parago tournament was won by none other than Chejong and Park Jong-hwan. So incredibly strong players. Chejong being strongest female player in the world, Park Jong-hwan being almost, I think he's third right now behind Kaje and Shin Jin-seo. They won the 8th Luoyang Cup. It's this Parago tournament. And this tournament featured 2 teams from Korea, 4 teams from China, 2 teams from Japan. And the finals were held on May 8th and featured many, many strong players. They defeated Yang Dingqin and Zhao Hongyu, I think, in the semifinals. Chejong and Park Jong-hwan have had success in the past, winning the World Parago Championships twice, but this is Park Jong-hwan's first time winning the Luoyang Cup. So I guess there's multiple Parago tournaments. By the way, Parago is gendered, so it is male-female, which is why I don't recognize a lot of the female names, unfortunately, here. Lee Chang-ho was also in this tournament with Park Ji-eun. Some of the other notable pairs were Keje and Yu Ji-hing. Some of the other notable pairs were Keje and Yu Ji-ying, Yang Dingqin and Zhao Hongyu, and Otake Hideo and Fujisawa Rina. The tournament followed Chinese rules, with each player having 1 hour of thinking time followed by 3 30-second Byoyomi periods, and the prize money was 200,000 yuan, which is roughly $28,000. So it's a good amount of money, but not the most in terms of these tournaments. But congratulations to Chejong and Park Jong-hwan, and now it's time for listener mail. Clay writes, "Hey Justin, I'm a longtime Magic the Gathering judge and tournament organizer, and we have no shortage of drama regarding draws as well. However, our drama is over intentional draws, IDs, which means that the players decide to report the match as a draw without playing. I used to play Magic when I was in middle school. I had this cool green deck with a lot of tramples and stuff, but that was the extent of my Magic involvement, and I've heard that was a good decision financially to not have that as a hobby. But I think that's very curious that people decide not to play and they just report the match as a draw. Continuing. In competitive Magic, we use a Swiss pairing system, so you're paired with opponents with similar records with a cut to a top 8 bracket at the end. If your record is good enough, let's say 4-0 out of 6 rounds, you may be able to secure a top 8 spot by IDing for the last few rounds, 4-0-2 to hit 7th or 8th, instead of playing them out. You won't have as high a placement in the top 8, but at least it guarantees it. Players less familiar with how tournaments work often complain that players should not ID and need to earn their spot in the top 8 by playing it out. As a tournament organizer, I believe that it's more of a reward for the players for playing well over the course of the day. If you force them to play, the players could also just play very slowly and cause a draw through normal gameplay. Even in more casual tournaments where prizes are based on record rather than standing, IDs are common in the last round, so both players end with the same record and prizing. It's a gesture of sportsmanship. Allowing draws makes sense in these contexts, record-based prizing and top cuts. A lot of interesting thoughts here in terms of like intentional draws. I didn't even know you could draw in Magic. I thought maybe, I guess I would need to know more about this, but the only way I can imagine right now is you attack each other, or you lose your life points at the same time, is what I'm assuming. But I mean, I think every game will have its own decisions to be made in terms of things like this and whatever's appropriate. And I think someone like you who has a lot of experience being a tournament organizer and a judge will have will be in a pretty good position to declare what I think makes sense for your tournaments. In terms of me, like although I don't have experience with stuff like that, I generally I feel like be on the side of less metagaming, the better, right? The less strategic like handshakes made, the better. And that people should just kind of try the best that they can every game, but that's just kind of my thought or my perspective on it. Continuing, this is obviously a lot different than what we're talking about with Go. Go also has much longer games, and I would assume usually doesn't top cut. So wanting to intentionally draw a game, through result reporting or gameplay, is probably way less common. If you're prizing based on standings and don't have a top cut, it would make sense to disallow draws so each game has to have a winner. Regarding the half-point Komi, Go is inherently unbalanced since the player to move first has a tangible advantage. In Magic, the player that goes first doesn't draw a card on their first turn. In Go, Black gets the advantage of going first. White gets compensated with Komi to smooth it out, but is still disadvantaged in general. So White is rewarded for keeping up by winning ties with the half point. I will have to kind of point something out here, that White isn't actually disadvantaged. Or I'm not sure which one you're saying is advantage. It is actually balanced at 6.5 Komi. It's because if you look at AI evaluations, 6.5 Komi is actually the right amount of Komi for Japanese rules. So if you want to think about it in terms of how a 0.5 Komi game can be balanced, you can kind of think of it as like, if you have a game where you're just flipping a coin, that is essentially a balanced game. But someone will win because there is a half point, there's a 50-50% chance of winning. It's not a game of skill. So imagine you have yet another balanced game, and then if you get a tie, you flip a coin for it. It's kind of like that. I'm probably not doing the best job of explaining it, but I just know that the AI considers the 6.5 Komi to be the valid amount of Komi for Japanese rules, and then 7 Komi for Chinese rules is the amount the AI says. I think your shot put example is off in that neither athlete, theoretically, has an advantage or can interact with the other. It'll be more like hurling or bocce, where if the second player throws exactly the same, it'll knock the other stone or ball out of the way. Admittedly, I have no Go tournament experience, and I may just be too green to see quite the same perspective as you on these. Just some thoughts from an 18Q Go player and jokingly Magic the Gathering 7D. Clay, thanks for writing in, Clay. I think it's so useful to use the Go ranking system to describe our skill in some other games, because if you've noticed in the field interviews episode, I described myself as a 25Q tennis player, and every Go player will immediately know what that means. There's some stuff to talk about here. I think I need to think about it some more, because I'm trying to think of a game where, like, you have a natural imbalance in the game, but the imbalance isn't the value of a full point, but only half a point. So it's like, I can't think of a good example right now, but I do feel that it is balanced and it can be balanced. But anyway, maybe I'll save that talk for another episode. Thank you for writing in, Clay. Kit writes, "Hi Justin, to offer some balance, I want to say in response to the people who've been asking you to get a co-host or saying that they don't enjoy podcasts with only one voice, that I personally prefer to listen to just one person talking and find the conversational format kind of irritating. I may be in the minority, but for me, your solo ramblings are perfect, and I wouldn't want you to think all of your listeners are wishing you had other guests." Thanks so much for the words of encouragement, Kit. I like the solo thing. I thought it would work, and I think it's working better than it's clearly not working for me now when I can't speak, but it's working better than I thought it would. And there's something to it, I think, where I do have time to reflect and compile my thoughts and present to you ideas and prepare them. Whereas in a conversational format, things can get derailed pretty quickly. And although I'm not saying that I'm ruling it out, but I appreciate your perspective on this, and thanks for that. I kind of assumed people enjoyed it because I have received a lot of listener mail saying that people like to listen to the podcast. So thanks for the encouragement. Continuing, I think the most important thing is that you do what makes it easy and pleasant for you to carry on making podcast and not feel like you have to up your game in a way that will make it stressful or feel like a chore. On an unrelated note, read the Hot Takes episode. I totally agree that draws should be allowed, and I think it could actually be a very exciting and satisfying finish to a game, because it shows what worthy opponents the players are for each other and how hard it is for either of them to get an edge. Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking. I thought it would be cool. Although I do reserve the fact that maybe if I were to see a lot of draws happen, I may get tired of it, but I don't know that until I see it happen. But I thought it would be cool to just see like two great players end in a draw. In response to what someone said about the possibility of players deciding to offer a draw when they can't be bothered to play, it would be easy to just not allow that and say that a draw is only possible when you go to scoring, that you can't agree to have one in advance. If someone didn't want to play the game, they would have to resign. Thanks for your continued work on Starpoint. I appreciate it, Kit. Well, thank you for writing in, Kit. That was a very nice, encouraging email. I'm not sure about the allowing people to draw, but then not allowing them to offer a draw. But I guess that kind of makes sense, although I think I would need to be better at Go in order to really think about whether that was a plausible thing. I don't know how hard it is for players to really like immediately tell that it would end in a draw. I guess at the highest level they would be able to know. I don't know actually at what point they would know. But I guess it's like kind of these questions are getting above my pay grade here. Next, Markasson says, "Just caught up with the last podcast. Looking forward to this one. By the way, the interviews were great. Maybe you could do some more in the future. YouTubers, AGA officials, professionals or strong amateurs, programmers, etc." Thanks for writing in, Markasson. It's something I would love to do more of. I really enjoyed doing the interviews. Thanks for writing in. Goran writes, Here's the time Magnus Carlsen offered a draw because he had an upset stomach. Oh yeah, and then I actually watched that video, Goran, and I immediately remembered this clip. It's funny because the guy he's playing against looks stoked to have a win against Magnus Carlsen, which is funny because it's just it's not a real win, right? It's not like you actually beat him, but it's a win on the record. So, thanks for sharing the video. Deep Emulsion writes, after thinking about your shot put example for the draws in Go, I think for me to really see if players are equally matched, they would have to play 2 games, one as black and one as white. If they draw both, then I guess I would be good with the draw and saying both players are equally matched. I do like there being the half point though, as I believe it lends to a different playstyle. Love the podcast. Keep up the awesome work. Thank you for your kind words, Deep Emulsion. And I don't know about the 2 games thing. I don't want to be too much like chess. I think that there's actually a lot of chaos and variability within a game of Go. that it's not just like two measurement. It's not like you're measuring something and you want to make sure you got the right measurement and measure it twice. Every game will have such different psychology and different situations that it's really not a contest. It's a game. So playing two when you normally would have played one, I think is changing the game a little bit. So I don't know, just my 2 cents on that one. And then finally, Crispy Toast writes, I think you should try and compare draws in Go to draws in tennis. Do you think that it would be as exciting if players got to deuce and it was considered a tie game? Or if the players got to 6-6 in a set, would you feel like both players and spectators would be satisfied if it was called a draw at that point? Congrats on getting third. I hope to go to a Go tournament sometime this year. Thanks for writing in, Crispy Toast. I think there's a slight difference here in tennis. In tennis, you can keep playing to find out who's the winner. In Go, it's not really like that. I mean, I guess you could play more games, but the thing is that the game is over and you have to set up the rules first and then decide whether it can draw or not, and then once you play the game, you either end up with a draw or not. In tennis, once you get to that drawn point, like a 6-6 set, you can play a tiebreaker and force it. You can actually do something about it. Whereas in Go, it's just really about the scoring convention. Let me see if I can reword this one more time. Let's just talk about the deuce, right? The game, the what's it called? 40-40, right? When you get 40-40 in a single game of tennis. That is a mechanic, I think, by design in tennis to make it more exciting. So that's just kind of built in for that reason, because you could have easily said just whoever gets to 4 points. Whoever gets to 4 points first wins. But they purposely said, no, you need to win by 2, just to emphasize the amount of skill you overpower your opponents by. So there's a lot of different stuff at play here. And the thing is that deuces can be resolved. And whoever wins a game in tennis is actually the one who deserves to win the game. And it's resolved without any kind of like coin flip or half point or anything like that. So I think it's slightly different here. I do think it makes it exciting for the tennis matches to keep going until you find a winner. And if there was a way to keep playing Go to find a winner, let's say you get to a point where the score is tied and you can keep playing somehow within the same game to get a winner, that would, I think, be the ideal situation. But I don't think there's a way you can do that in Go. So a lot of thoughts. This draw, like my hot takes episode was a while back, and it's still going. People are still talking about the draws. It's a lot to talk about, and it's so split too. I've seen all these opinions from either side, so it's really interesting to hear all your thoughts on this stuff. The question of the week this week is, what is an opening principle that has been helpful to you? If you want to share your thoughts on this question, or if you have a Go story to share, or have a question of your own for me, you can comment on YouTube or the Reddit post for this episode, or you can email me directly at starpointbaduk@gmail.com. That's starpoint, BADUK@gmail.com. If you're a YouTube listener, I would greatly appreciate a like and subscribe, and if you're a podcast listener, reviews and ratings also help. A very, very special thank you to Chris M., Jeffrey H., and John M. for supporting Starpoint. And you know what Chochikun has to say about St. Patrick's Day? Well, he really likes St. Patrick's Day. He's mentioned this because green means go. Thanks for listening. Keep playing Go. By the way, Chochikun didn't actually say that. That was just a joke. Bye.